Would you walk us through the Boko Haram offensive?
Boko Haram offensive was really not part of executive outcomes. That was STEP International that actually partook in that offensive. I need to first of all make it very clear that we were a subcontractor. There was a prime contractor appointed that appointed us as a subcontractor. Our initial aim was not Boko Haram per se, but it was to rescue the Chibok girls. They were the girls that had been kidnapped, and where the Western response was #SaveTheGirls. That type of nonsense does not save girls. Unfortunately, these girls became victims of a situation where the security had broken down in a specific area. They were kidnapped, and that was the first mission, rescue the Chibok girls. We then did a selection process of the Nigerian soldiers. The soldiers were retained after the selection process, were then trained in a very specific way to conduct a hostage rescue operation. And that requires a very specific type of person. However, approximately 5 or 6 weeks into the training of the hostage rescue team, we were asked to change our mission. And that mission was to go to a town called Maiduguri in northeast Nigeria that had come under severe threat of Boko Haram. We then rapidly had to transition what we were doing and suddenly train a very offensive force with a minimum of equipment, and we rushed to Maiduguri. We met with the 7th Infantry Division commander. We finally understood the pressures he was under, and our suggestion was to him that this force we had trained, which we named the 72nd Mobile Strike Force, would actually spearhead the division. And that is precisely what we did. The operation was in 3 phases. The first phase was to actually cut a dividing line across northeastern Nigeria and isolate Boko Haram into 2 defined areas, and then mop up one area in the south was the start, and after that was done, mop up in the north. The division would follow behind, occupy terrain. We would train the division in situ in defensive positions, etc. But we were never allowed to execute the entire operation. So in 1 month, we took back terrain larger than Belgium from Boko Haram. We were not allowed to finish because it came at a time when governments were in the process of changing. I think President Jonathan's government possibly saw the entire Boko Haram contract, if we call it that, almost as a last gasp in order to regain popularity. The incoming president, President Buhari, was heavily supported by a foreign government, and one of the first missions was to terminate our contract.
Could you name that foreign government?
Yes, we were told it was the United States, and they had actually funded President Buhari's campaign. The campaign manager for President Buhari came from the US. And I'm not saying that the United States is bad. I understand foreign interests, but I would have thought that a threat such as Boko Haram on the integrity of the state of Nigeria ought to be actually a priority. It wasn't.
Why do you think the US would intervene to abort such operation?
Again, I can't answer that. I think that the US can answer, but what I've come to realize, that is when a government's foreign interests clash with the state's own domestic interests, conflict is bound to ensue. And those conflicts usually just continue with no end. And we can look at all the conflicts in Africa where foreign forces have come in, they've prolonged those conflicts, they haven't ended those conflicts. And the amount of money and manpower and equipment thrown at those conflicts says to me that something is wrong if no end result is achieved. And surely that end result should be to end the conflict and establish a basis for negotiations, come to an agreement, and then re-establish governance. But that's not what's happening in Africa.